We'll try to come back to Dean in a moment. You see some of the pictures. It is a huge gathering. Dean was speaking to me earlier this morning as people were lined up waiting to see if they could get in. There are so many dignitaries that had the priority for that seating. We'll see how many of those members of the public who were lined up were able to get in, but certainly a man who touched many points in our community over his 89 years. Errol Lewis is joining me from Albany and has his own reflections on the life of Percy Sutton. Errol, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell me your initial thoughts here on the legacy of Percy Sutton.
Well, you know, there are a lot of different angles, and everybody who's spent any time in Harlem has a Percy Sutton story. I actually was talking with my dad the other day, and he was a sergeant in the 32nd Precinct up in Central Harlem, and in walks Percy Sutton one day. This must have been in the 1960s, and he was decked out in an auxiliary uniform. He was an auxiliary NYPD cop for a while. He comes in and snaps a salute to my father, who's telling him, like, you don't have to, you don't have to salute me. I mean, he was already fairly well known even at that point, and but this was something that he wanted to do. He had a very interesting way of moving through the community where he would try on different roles. He was the media mogul, he was the civil rights attorney, he was the politician, and a politician is somebody who's asking you for something. So he wasn't always in a sort of a commanding position. He was there as somebody who was trying to help others succeed, and that, I think, is going to be the legacy that people remember.
Errol, as we're speaking, I want to get back to some of the live pictures from Riverside Church and take a look at the people as they continue to file in here. It looks like it'll be a little while before this gets underway, and we have seen many familiar faces coming in through the last little while, probably over the last hour, as they have been assembling for what is certainly a significant event for the black community, the legacy of Percy Sutton in Harlem and elsewhere in New York City. Errol, another question for you on what Percy Sutton's political accomplishments were. We're going to hear from his three colleagues in the so-called Gang of Four, and we had some great reflections from them on New York One last week as they reflected on Percy Sutton's political career. What stands out for you?
Well, as far as his political career, well, he was the longest-serving Manhattan Borough president at a time when the borough president had a lot of power as a member of the Board of Estimates. So that's something that I just tend to think of. It often gets overlooked. But he was one of the people who voted on, you know, every contract of any significance, every spending bill of any significance in New York City. You know, not just in Manhattan, but throughout the city, and for a decade. So he's a major player, and he showed not only by running for mayor in 1977, but also his conduct as Manhattan Borough president, as a member of the old Board of Estimate, that something that a lot of people take for granted, which is that there were talented young black attorneys like him who were rising up through the political system and that they could help run the city. And David Dinkins always said that this was a big part of what enabled him to run and succeed, run successfully in 1989 for mayor, was the fact that Percy Sutton had come before him and had showed that out of this Harlem political community were leaders who could be trusted with public safety and complicated spending and education and all the other things that the Board of Estimate used to deal with.
All right, Errol, stay with me for a moment. I want to talk about the radio business in a moment, but I've got Dean Meminger connected now, who's been at Riverside all morning. Dean, set the scene for us, please.
Well, right now you continue to have a lot of folks walking into Riverside Church here, Pat, and people have been lined up in terms of just ordinary New Yorkers and people from Harlem. They've been standing outside of the church for several hours. They're continuing to go inside, and there you're seeing members of the Tuskegee Airmen, you know, which is a very important part of Percy Sutton's life, the first black fighter pilots for the military. And you were talking about the radio side of his career as well, and, you know, a prominent figure when it comes to communications, Pat, starting inner city broadcasting here in New York with his 107.5 WBLS and 1190 AM WLIB radio, the first black-owned radio stations in New York City, and now they have some 17 stations in 4 cities or 4 markets around the country. So he went from political activist, lawyer, to businessman and broadcaster, Pat.
And which transitions me, Dean, into my question for Errol. Errol, of course, we know you from the Daily News. We know you from your radio work as well. It's a tough business. And Percy Sutton, on top of having a political career that would have been enough career for a lot of people, has a whole other dimension to his career with the radio business.
Oh yeah, you have no idea how many radio stations go out of business each and every year. I mean, it is a very tough business. I mean, when recession hits, radio takes a dive just like everybody else. You know, the ads for real estate or for jobs or automobiles. I mean, radio's the first thing to take a hit. And he not only succeeded, but he thrived, and he actually pioneered this new sound. I mean, the late, great Frankie Crocker, for those of us who grew up listening to the radio, I mean, he really pioneered an urban contemporary sound that you can hear now from coast to coast. The whole tone, the look and feel, the banter, the joking. This was something that was created on WBLS, and it was the #1 station in the market in the late 1970s.
Dean Meminger's been talking to people as they have come in to Riverside Church this morning. One of the people he spoke to earlier was Jesse Jackson, who was talking to us about the legacy that Percy Sutton leaves behind. Here's what Jesse Jackson had to say.
We're indebted to Percy Sutton in so many ways. You know, a star may be brilliant in one thing and does it well, but Percy was a galaxy of stars. His work in civil rights work, breaking down Jim Crow barriers from Texas to New York, as a lawyer on visible and not so visible cases, that dimension of his work is stellar. His work as a state rep and creating a caucus in Albany began to alter its culture, and then as borough president, and then a groundbreaking run for mayor, which laid the ground for David Dinkins.
Of course, Al Sharpton will be speaking at this service when it gets underway, the funeral service for Percy Sutton. Back to Dean Meminger. Dean, it looks to me like they're settling down and about to get underway.
Yeah, it seems like they definitely are, and a lot of folks still trying to find their seats in the back. One thing to point out, people may not know, who may be a bit younger, but Percy Sutton was the lawyer, the personal lawyer for Malcolm X. He said he first met Malcolm X back in the 50s, and when Percy Sutton became an assemblyman, he said he wanted to be associated with Malcolm X when many other elected officials, including black elected officials, did not want to be associated with Malcolm X. So a lot of people know his legacy as a part of that, representing Malcolm X and his family. And Jesse Jackson said people didn't know this either, but Percy Sutton was the personal lawyer for Jesse Jackson's family as well.
Looks like we're about to get underway. We're going to bring this to you in its entirety when it does get underway. I will tell you, warn you that at 1 o'clock, though, if the funeral service has not concluded, we will shift coverage of the funeral service to our website, NewYork1.com. Because we have a commitment to join the governor's State of the State address at 1 o'clock. Errol Lewis, a final thought from you as we get ready for this to begin on Percy Sutton's legacy.
A lot of people talk about Percy Sutton's as a predecessor of Mayor Dinkins as the first black mayor. And questions are raised, well, did he also lay the groundwork for Barack Obama to become elected president? The rumors that I've been hearing is that, not the president himself, but that a high-ranking emissary of the administration may be attending and indeed speaking at the funeral today. So we should all keep an eye out for that as well.
Errol, appreciate you being with us this morning. I know you've got a busy day ahead with the aforementioned Governor Patterson's speech coming up. Thanks for making time for us.
Sure. Albany's lovely this time of year.
Yeah, it's pretty cold in the city, too. Nonetheless, a big turnout here at Riverside. Our thanks to Errol Lewis. Dean Meminger is going to remain there throughout, and we'll provide coverage as we wrap this up as well. But it looks like we're about to get underway with the formal part of this, so we listen in now at Riverside Church.